Hello and welcome back to another Lamp Bible study. And today we are going ahead to the book of Leviticus. And I'm reading from an NIV Collegiate Bible. And of course, I will be reading different versions of the Bible. I've read multiple different versions of the Bible, including the Ye Old King James, as well as King James and Holman's, and this is the NIV. And so I decided let's go ahead and continue with Moses and read Exodus and Leviticus, the Numbers, then Deuteronomy, and then I can go back and do Genesis before going on to Joshua. But there's no specific or particular order, but I do like going through the first couple of books, and it was kind of interesting how it just happened. I decided to start with Exodus, and I believe that it was an exodus for myself to go ahead and start doing these Lamp Bible studies, to go ahead and start sharing the word and reading along. I'm grateful. I hope that you continue to join me in reading along in the Bible and seeking God's wisdom. So let's begin. Leviticus. The burnt offering. The Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting. He said, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when any of you brings an offering to the Lord, bring as your offering an animal from either the herd or the flock. If the offering is a burnt offering from the herd, he is to offer a male without defect. He must present it at the entrance to the tent of meeting so that it will be acceptable to the Lord. He is to lay his hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted on his behalf to make atonement for him. He is to slaughter the young bull before the Lord, and then Aaron's sons, the priests, shall bring the blood and sprinkle it against the altar on all sides at the entrance to the tent of meeting. He is to skin the burnt offering and cut it into pieces. The sons of Aaron, the priest, are to put fire on the altar and arrange wood on the fire. Then Aaron's sons, the priests, shall arrange the pieces, including the head and the fat, on the burning wood that is on the altar. He is to wash the inner parts and the legs with water, and the priest is to burn all of it on the altar. It is a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. So when we left Exodus, the tabernacle has been built. God gave instructions for Moses to go ahead and build the tabernacle, as well as a place to keep the Ark of the Covenant, as well as a holy place and the most holy place. So the tabernacle has now been built, and so now we're learning about the offerings that are to be burnt. And Aaron and his sons were given the priestly duties by God. So they are going to be the priests and the priests to God. And we also learned about their clothing, their specific clothing, and what it would look like. If the offering is a burnt offering from the flock, from either the sheep or the goats, he is to offer a male without defect. He is to slaughter it at the north side of the altar before the Lord, and Aaron's sons, the priests, shall sprinkle its blood against the altar on all sides. He is to cut it into pieces, and the priest shall arrange them, including the head and the fat, on the burning wood that is on the altar. He is to wash the inner parts and the legs with water, and the priest is to bring all of it and burn it on the altar. It is a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. If the offering to the Lord is a burnt offering of birds, he is to offer a dove or a young pigeon. The priest shall bring it to the altar, wring off the head, and burn it on the altar. Its blood shall be drained out on the side of the altar. He is to remove the crop with its contents and throw it to the east side of the altar where the ashes are. He shall tear it open by the wings, not severing it completely, and then the priest shall burn it on the wood that is on the fire on the altar. It is a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. So we're going over the type of burnt offerings and the specific animals that were to be given for the burnt offerings, and how they were to be offered on the altar. And what kind of things can you think of? Or what does this tell you? Like, does this bring any thoughts or feelings? Reading about the offerings to the Lord. This is to redeem oneself of sin, basically, or to give a thank offering and such. So we're learning more about what types of offerings were given in the tabernacle. The grain offering. When someone brings a grain offering to the Lord, his offering is to be of fine flour. He is to pour oil on it, put incense on it, and take it to Aaron's sons, the priests. The priest shall take a handful of the fine flour and oil, together with all the incense, and burn this as a memorial portion on the altar, an offering made by fire, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. A little bit of a stumble over there, but let's continue. The rest of the grain offering belongs to Aaron and his sons. It is a most holy part of the offerings made to the Lord by fire. If you bring a grain offering baked in an oven, it is to consist of fine flour, cakes made without yeast and mixed with oil, or wafers made without yeast and spread with oil. If your grain offering is prepared on a griddle, it is to be made of fine flour mixed with oil and without yeast. Crumble it and pour oil on it. It is a grain offering. If your grain offering is cooked in a pan, it is to be made of fine flour and oil. Bring the grain offering made of these things to the Lord. Present it to the priest, who shall take it to the altar. He shall take out the memorial portion from the grain offering and burn it on the altar as an offering made by fire, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. The rest of the grain offering belongs to Aaron and his sons. It is a most holy part of the offerings made to the Lord by fire. So remember that Aaron and his sons are now the priests, and so their duties are to be priests to the people. And so they don't have any other type of duties within the nation of Israel. So in order for them to be provided for, they were to take some of these offerings, whether it be the burnt offerings or the grain offerings. They had a portion of these offerings so that they could eat as well and they could partake. So this goes to show us that God was already preparing his people, and he was preparing his priests for serving the Lord. He was preparing the priests to serve him, and he was also providing for them. Every grain offering you bring to the Lord must be made without yeast, for you are not to burn any yeast or honey in an offering made to the Lord by fire. You may bring them to the Lord as an offering of the first fruits, but they are not to be offered on the altar as a pleasing aroma. Season all your grain offerings with salt. Do not leave the salt of the covenant of your God out of your grain offering. Add salt to all your offerings. All of these are symbols as well. So a lot of times salt was used, not only as a seasoning, but as a preservative. And salt is used as a good thing throughout the Bible. And so you don't have to necessarily think of salt and how we use it today. You go and you order some French fries and they're heavily salted, or you ask for more salt and you love them. But also salt, as we know, too much salt can end up with high blood pressure. But this is back when they were providing sacrifices, and salt, as we'll learn throughout the Bible, is used in a good sense. It's used in a good term, and we'll find out more as we read along why that is. If you bring a grain offering of first fruits to the Lord, offer crushed heads of new grain roasted in the fire. Put oil and incense on it. It is a grain offering. The priest shall burn the memorial portion of the crushed grain and the oil together with all the incense as an offering made by the Lord by so an offering made to the Lord by fire. The fellowship offering. If someone offering, if someone's offering is a fellowship offering, and he offers an animal from the herd, whether male or female, he is to present before the Lord an animal without defect. He is to lay his hand on the head of his offering and slaughter it at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Then Aaron's sons, the priests, shall sprinkle the blood against the altar on all sides. From the fellowship offering he is to bring a sacrifice made to the Lord by fire. All the fat that covers the inner parts or is connected to them, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, and the covering of the liver, which he will remove with the kidneys. Then Aaron's sons are to burn it on the altar on top of the burnt offering that is on the burning wood, as an offering made by fire, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. And so what we have here is, again, another fellowship type offering. And offerings are to be given freely as well. They're supposed to be giving freely, and it's basically just giving back what God has already provided you. And so you're recognizing your blessing, and you're just also giving back what God has blessed you. So there's many different reasons for these type of offerings, and we'll continue on to see what other type of offerings or what specifics are for these offerings. If he offers an animal from the flock as a fellowship offering to the Lord, he is to offer a male or female without defect. If he offers a lamb, he is to present it before the Lord. He is to lay his hand on the head of his offering and slaughter it in front of the tent of meeting. Then Aaron's sons shall sprinkle its blood against the altar on all sides. From the fellowship offering he is to bring a sacrifice made to the Lord by fire. Its fat, the entire fat tail cut off close to the backbone, all the fat that covers the inner parts or is connected to them, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, and the covering of the liver, which he will remove with the kidneys. The priest shall burn them on the altar as food, an offering made to the Lord by fire. If his offering is a goat, he is to present it before the Lord. He is to lay his hand on its head and slaughter it in front of the tent of meeting. Then Aaron's sons shall sprinkle its blood against the altar on all sides. From what he offers, he is to make this offering to the Lord by fire. All the fat that covers the inner parts or is connected to them, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, and the covering of the liver, which he will remove with the kidneys. The priest shall burn them on the altar as food, an offering made by fire, a pleasing aroma. All that fat is the Lord's. So far, what kind of thoughts or feelings do you have? I know that during this time they were having to do these offerings, and so what was really important were the utensils that were made for the tabernacle, as well as the water basins to wash up after they would slaughter the animals and sprinkle their blood. And then the priests would have to re-cleanse themselves or wash up so they wouldn't have blood everywhere. But do know that this was an understanding as something that was meant to show that they were being grateful or they were being redeemed through these offerings. This was during that time their way of being redeemed, and before Jesus, because this was relying on what God had told them to do, how to consecrate, how to remove the sin from them. So again, this is before the ultimate Lamb, which is Jesus Christ, which we all are grateful for. This is a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. Wherever you live, you must not eat any fat or any blood. The sin offering. So before I go into the sin offering, this again is in Leviticus, And it just said that wherever you live, you must not eat any fat or any blood. So again, it's talking about the people during that day, because the best parts, the really tasty parts, were supposed to be given to the Lord, especially during these offerings. And so um, this was to tell them at the time that these are the directions on how to give offerings, what to use for the offerings, and how to specifically handle the offerings. Later on, especially when we get to the New Testament and during Jesus' time, we're going to see some changes. And so let's continue to read here. The sin offering. The Lord said to Moses, "Say to the Israelites, when anyone sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden in any of the Lord's commands, if the anointed priest sins, bringing guilt on the people, he must bring to the Lord a young bull without defect as a sin offering for the sin he has committed. He is to present the bull at the entrance to the tent of meeting before the Lord. He is to lay his hand on its head and slaughter it before the Lord. Then the anointed priest shall take some of the bull's blood and carry it into the tent of meeting. He is to dip his finger into the blood and sprinkle some of it 7 times before the Lord, 7 times in front of the curtain of the sanctuary. So again, 7 times. That's very important. That's even referenced back all the way into Genesis. So this is directed at a priest if he sins and he is wanting to repent, and this is how he is to offer his sin offering. And so the priest shall then put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of fragrant incense that is before the Lord in the tent of meeting. The rest of the bull's blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering at the entrance to the tent of meeting. He shall remove all the fat from the bull of the sin offering, the fat that covers the inner parts or is connected to them, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, and the coverings of the liver, which he will remove with the kidneys, just as the fat is removed from the ox sacrificed as a fellowship offering. Then the priest shall burn them on the altar of burnt offering. But the hide of the bull in all its flesh, as well as the head and legs, the inner parts and offal, that is, all the rest of the bull, he must take outside the camp to a place ceremonially clean, where the ashes are thrown, and burn it in a wood fire on the ash heap. If the whole Israelite community sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden in any of the Lord's commands, even though the community is unaware of the matter, they are guilty. This brings us back, because this is the body, this is supposed to represent the body. Everybody is supposed to be following in God's word and God's commands. And so when just one person sins, then the whole community is represented. The whole community is responsible. So this is talking about what to do when someone does commit a sin or goes against the commands. So when they become aware of the sin they committed, the assembly must bring a young bull as a sin offering and present it before the tent of meeting. The elders of the community are to lay their hands on the bull's head before the Lord, and the bull shall be slaughtered before the Lord. Then the anointed priest is to take some of the bull's blood into the tent of meeting. He shall dip his finger into the blood and sprinkle it before the Lord 7 times in front of the curtain. He is to put some of the blood on the horns of the altar that is before the Lord in the tent of meeting. The rest of the blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering at the entrance to the tent of meeting. He shall remove all the fat from it and burn it on the altar, and do with this bull just as he did with the bull for the sin offering. In this way the priest will make atonement for them, and they will be forgiven. Then he shall take the bull outside the camp and burn it as he burned the first bull. This is the sin offering for the community. So what we're learning is that again, the different types of offerings to the Lord, including the sin offering, as well as the offering of for the priests and the offering for the whole Israelite community. From what I can tell, and how the people acted, there may have been quite a bit of sin offerings, you know, back in that time frame. And and other offerings as well. And so we're seeing though that this was needed in order to maintain presence with God. This because God does not he can't have sin. He can't. He's sinless. He is holy. We have a holy God, and so in order for God to even have His presence there, His people needed to have atonement, and they needed to be sinless. And so this was examples of the law and of the commands that they needed to follow in order to maintain being with the Lord, maintaining that blessing. Again, this is before Jesus, and this is why, because it's going to show us that throughout the Old Testament, the community, Israel, fails over and over and over and over again at upholding the law and upholding all of these types of offerings and sacrifices. And unfortunately, we as humans, we fail over and over and over again when it comes to being sinless. We can't go a day without committing a sin. Even a thought that is wrong is a sin. And so that's why we needed our Savior. We needed the ultimate Lamb, which is Jesus, the Son of God, to come and do what He did, And so, but this provides us in-depth information as to what was needed once the tabernacle was built, because now they have the laws from Moses on the tablets, and now they have the ark, and they're able to, and they built the tabernacle to specifications, and now they're being provided directions on what they need to do for offerings and the different types of offerings, the first fruits and the sin offerings and the grain offerings and fellowship offerings. And that is shows us just what the people needed to do, and that is to continually remind them to be humble, to understand that they need forgiveness of sin, that they need to rely on God. And that goes for us too. We're not under the law. However, we do always need to remind ourselves that we can't do it alone. We definitely can't do it alone, that we need the Lord. We need the Lord to guide us. We need the Lord to provide for us. And so what kind of feelings or thoughts are you getting from reading this? How would it feel to see the offering started? What would it look like? What kind of emotions would you have? I know nowadays we don't typically see sacrifices such as actually killings of animals to be an offering. Of course, we don't need that anymore, thanks to Jesus. But what kind of thoughts or feelings are you having? Could you see these types of does it provide you imagery of what was needed or what was done during Moses' time? Again, this is the sin offering for the community, is what we just read about. When a leader sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden in any of the commands of the Lord his God, he is guilty. When he is made aware of the sin he committed, he must bring as his offering a male goat without defect. He is to lay his hand on the goat's head and slaughter it at the place where the burnt offering is slaughtered before the Lord. It is a sin offering. Then the priest shall take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering and pour out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. He shall burn all the fat on the altar as he burned the fat of the fellowship offering. In this way, the priest will make atonement for the man's sin, and he will be forgiven. Again, the importance of using an unblemished animal is very important as well here. And it's described because you're giving the best to the Lord. You're giving the best of everything to the Lord, even in the offering itself. The fat, the good parts of the animal are given directly to the Lord. And so we're seeing that. We're seeing what was needed and what had to be done. Again, when a leader sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden, because we as man, we do things and we also do things unintentionally. We don't mean to sin, but it happens. We end up doing something that is not good or correct, and it is sinful. And so once we come to realize it, then nowadays we ask Jesus for forgiveness. We ask God for forgiveness. We're able to pray about it. But back then, they needed to bring an offering, a specific type of offering, and it needed to be prepared and done in a specific way. And it had to be, because this was a representation of what God wanted, with the priests, with the commands, with the most holy place, with how the slaughtering of the animal was to be done, how the preparation of the animal after its slaughter was supposed to be done, how the burnt offering was to be done specifically. All this is to remind them how holy and important this is. If a member of the community sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden in any of the Lord's commands, he is guilty. When he is made aware of the sin he committed, he must bring as his offering for the sin he committed a female goat without defect. He is to lay his hand on the head of the sin offering and slaughter it at the place of the burnt offering. Then the priest is to take some of the blood with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering and pour out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. He shall remove all the fat, just as the fat is removed from the fellowship offering, and the priest shall burn it on the altar as an aroma, pleasing to the Lord. In this way the priest will make atonement for him, and he will be forgiven. So as we'll learn later on, especially in Romans, for the wages of sin is death, the reason why, again, these animals were used is because when we sin, the wages of sinning equals death. It is against the Lord. It is not what the Lord wants for us. And so, therefore, it has to be atoned, and the atonement is death. And so the person would place their hand on the head of the animal and then slaughter the head, because that animal was to represent themselves dying to that sin and repenting. And so what kind of thoughts or feelings does that bring to you? What kind of imagery are you coming to an understanding of the importance of what was going on during the time? Is it providing you in-depth information as to specifically what was going on, what was needed, why it was needed, what the importance of these offerings were, what the importance of the priest's role, what the importance of the utensils themselves and the water basins and the tabernacle, and what the commands that the community were to follow. And then once again, if they weren't following them and they committed sin, they needed to have atonement for it. And so this provides us with specifics that they were given during this time to make sure that they were doing the correct type of atonement for their sin that they committed. Again, this is again in the Old Testament. It's during the law. The eye for the eye, tooth for tooth thing was in full play. If he brings a lamb as his sin offering, he is to bring a female without defect. He is to lay his hand on its head and slaughter it for a sin offering at the place where the burnt offering is slaughtered. Then the priest shall take some of the blood of the sin offering with its finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering and pour out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. He shall remove all the fat, just as the fat is removed from the lamb of the fellowship offering. And the priest shall burn it on the altar on top of the offerings made to the Lord by fire. In this way the priest will make atonement for him for the sin he has committed, and he will be forgiven. So while I'm reading this, I'm starting to get images. Now, we've talked about, and we'll continue to talk about, and I'll continue to say this, the Bible is the past, present, and future. It is a beyond, so we grow in wisdom, but it's also something that is beyond our wisdom. And so we have to ask God for guidance and understanding continually, because this is the living word. This is God's word. So things that I keep getting in my mind are literally the reason why we needed Jesus so much. And blood represented the lifeblood. It represented what's in everybody, which is blood. And so when Jesus was crucified, he spilt his blood for us. And so blood plays a significant portion into the imagery and what's needed because it also represents life and death. And it was what's needed to make the Jesus for his sacrifice, the sacrifice, the lamb. He was the lamb for eternity. And so also what we're seeing is these animals were representing of the sin, and again, the death to that sin, but it also the animal's lifeblood. It was to be sprinkled. The lifeblood was to be sprinkled and also poured out. And so we're seeing multiple imageries and representations. And to me, knowing that imagery and those representations are throughout the Bible, to me, I'm getting thrown all the way to the New Testament when I'm reading this, and the reason why Jesus had to go through what he had to go through. Let's continue to read. If a person sins because he does not speak up when he hears a public charge to testify regarding something he has seen or learned about, he will be held responsible. I want to just read this one more time because this speaks to us today. It speaks to you. It speaks to me. It speaks to everybody. Let me read it again. If a person sins because he does not speak up when he hears a public charge to testify regarding something he has seen or learned about, he will be held responsible. Does that happen today? Do people see things and speak up? I know lately, when it comes to especially the past 20 years, with the huge amount of cell phone increase, that more people are somewhat, as we can tell through media, they're recording actions and they are speaking up. However, does it happen all the time? Is it enough? Are we only seeing glimpses, or is this becoming more commonplace? What are your feelings or thoughts over this? If you see something, would you say something? Especially if it comes to a public charge, would you testify? Would you feel the need to testify? Will you feel comfortable? And reading the Bible, it puts you in that place. And it puts you in those, it gives you all the feelings that you could ever feel in life, including being uncomfortable. And that is okay. It is to make us uncomfortable because not only is it a reflection, but it's telling us what to do and we know it's correct. We know it's right. And it's okay that it makes us uncomfortable. We also are always weary about the consequences of speaking out or saying something. And what we need to do instead is focus on the Lord. If the Lord is trying to speak to us and tell us to say something, see something, and then say something, we need to follow that instruction. This goes along with what I mentioned throughout Lamp Bible Study, is that I truly believe the Lord does speak to us more often than what we even think of. We just think that he only speaks to us when we want him to speak to us, when we're requesting something. Again, the Lord is God. He's not a genie in a bottle, and he's not something to just dial into and or go through a drive-through. Yeah, God, I'm gonna need let me see here. I'm thinking I'm wanting to get an extra large a triple chocolate shake with some, unfortunately, God is not like that. You know? God is not going to come back to you and be like, okay, your total is, please pull forward. That's not going to happen. And if it does, please provide a comment. I mean, you could. This just. I mean, it's just the word is speaking. It's speaking. All of it. All of it's significant. There is no. All of the details are significant. Let's continue to read. Or if a person touches anything ceremonially unclean, whether the carcasses of unclean wild animals, or of unclean livestock, or of unclean creatures that move along the ground, even though he is unaware of it, he has become unclean and is guilty. Or if he touches human uncleanness, anything that would make him unclean, even though he is unaware of it, when he learns of it, he will be guilty. So throughout the Bible, it tells us, especially in the Old Testament, what can make man unclean. Again, please understand this is back under the law. Under the law, and this is the Old Testament. And this is directions given to the Israelites to be able to continue to live with God, for God to be with them in a form. Because God is everywhere. He can't be kept in a box. So in whatever manner or fashion God wants to represent himself, he's going to do it. And however manner and fashion he wants to say, and because he knows how people can be in his presence, he's going to do it. He's going to tell us. He's going to tell us how to be holy. And so, or if he touches human uncleanness, anything that would make him unclean, even though he is unaware of it, when he learns of it, he will be guilty. And we'll learn more about that soon. Or if a person thoughtlessly takes an oath to do anything, whether good or evil, in any matter one might carelessly swear about, even though he is unaware of it, in any case, when he learns of it, he will be guilty. So, have you sweared before? Have you promised to do something, whether good or evil? This is talking about, we do know it says in the Bible that it says, let your word be your word. So let your okay be your yes be your yes and your no be your no. And we'll go over that part in different part of the Bible as well. We'll get some more actual in-depth actual quote, because I'm not quite sure if that's the actual quote, so please don't take that as an actual quote, but we will get more in depth with these. When anyone is guilty in any of these ways, he must confess in what way he has sinned, and as a penalty for the sin he has committed, he must bring to the Lord a female lamb or goat from the flock as a sin offering, and the priest shall make atonement for him for his sin. If he cannot afford a lamb, he is to bring 2 doves or 2 young pigeons to the Lord as a penalty for his sin, one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. He is to bring them to the priest, who shall first offer the one for the sin offering. He is to wring its head from its neck, and not severing it completely, and is to sprinkle some of the blood of the sin offering against the side of the altar. The rest of the blood must be drained out at the base of the altar. It is a sin offering. The priest shall then offer the other as a burnt offering in the prescribed way, and make atonement for him for the sin he has committed, and he will be forgiven. So this also shows us that even back then there were poor people. There were wealthy people within the Israelite community, but there was always be a way. There was always a provided way for someone to make atonement for their sin. And it gives us specifics in here, 2 young pigeons or two doves. So so there was no excuse. There would be no excuse not to be able to go ahead and make atonement for the sin that was committed, whether you're wealthy or whether you're poor. And this goes all the way back. Everything that throughout our lives, throughout history and throughout the future, is literally in the Bible. Every single thing. There is nothing new under the sun, and there's nothing new that God has not already seen. I believe that of anything, God is timeless, and maybe that God is the only one that's timeless. Because he is the past, present, and the future. He is the Alpha and the Omega, and so he's seen it all. He's heard it all. He's been through it all, and so he already knows. And in the Word, in the Holy Word describes so much that includes the past, present, and future. And throughout here, you can see. And another thing, again with the blood, I remember Jesus being pierced on the side and blood running out. And so that's another example of a sacrifice. The Lord, God's Son, came down and sacrificed himself to remove our sin forever, for eternity. And so I really do believe that we all need Jesus. And if you have not accepted Jesus into your heart, I pray that you will make some prayers and you will really think about it. And throughout these Bible studies, you'll get to know him if you haven't. If you do know him, you'll be strengthened. I pray that we'll all be strengthened. And I pray that if you have not asked Jesus into your heart, you will go ahead and ask Jesus into your heart. Pray about it. Be with the Lord. Continue to read and continue to gain in that wisdom, and you will feel something. You will feel different. And when it's your time to ask, and when it's your time, it is your time, and it will happen. It is so simple. Let's continue to read. If, however, he cannot afford 2 doves or 2 young pigeons, he is to bring it as an offering for his sin 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour for a sin offering. He must not pour oil or incense on it, because it is a sin offering. He is to bring it to the priest, who shall take a handful of it as a memorial portion and burn it on the altar on top of the offerings made to the Lord by fire. It is a sin offering. In this way, the priest will make atonement for him for any of these sins he has committed, and he will be forgiven. The rest of the offering will belong to the priest, as in the case of the grain offering. The guilt offering. The Lord said to Moses, when a person commits a violation and sins unintentionally in regard to any of the Lord's holy things, he is to bring to the Lord as a penalty a ram from the flock, one without defect and of the proper value in silver, according to the shekel, tongue twister. It is a guilt offering. He must make restitution for what he has failed to do in regard to the holy things, at a fifth of the value to that, and give it all to the priests, who will make atonement for him with the ram as a guilt offering, and he will be forgiven. If a person sins and does what is forbidden in any of the Lord's commands, even though he does not know it, he is guilty and will be held responsible. He is to bring to the priest as a guilt offering a ram from the flock, one without defect and of the proper value. In this way, the priest will make atonement for him for the wrong he has committed unintentionally, and he will be forgiven. It is a guilt offering. He has been guilty of wrongdoing against the Lord. So all of this is very important. So back then, even if it was unintentional, sin needed to be atoned for. Even now, when we do sin and it's unintentionally, God knows all. God sees all. He knows all. He knows we sin. So we will be held responsible. And how we request forgiveness, again, is through prayer and faith and humbling ourselves before the Lord and asking for forgiveness. And he is abundant in mercy. The Lord is abundant in mercy, and he loves us. So he will offer his forgiveness freely. That's not to say he doesn't punish his children. He does not punish people. There could still be punishment, but there's a difference between punishment that you'll have here and eternal punishment. You don't want eternal punishment. And when the eternal punishment comes with the one great commandment, and that is not believing in the Son of God, in the Savior, in Jesus Christ. And that will get you to the ultimate punishment. So nobody wants that. Nobody wants the ultimate punishment, which is the eternal death. We don't want that. We want to be in God's glory. So we are to humble ourselves and ask for forgiveness. So in review of what we just read from Leviticus, from the beginning, we know that after Exodus, the tabernacle has been built. So now God is providing Moses with directions, and Moses is providing these also directions to Aaron and his sons, because they are now the priests in the tabernacle. So we read through the burnt offerings and the specific animals that were needed from the flocks. Again, unblemished. Male, usually offer a male without defect from the herd. And there's, again, the person is to place their hand over the head as a symbol that they have confessed, that they have made a sin, and that the animal is taking over for their sin, and it will be sacrificed. So not only is this sacrifice going to be just burnt up and has no other use, it actually does have a use, because the priests also were to take some portions of these offerings, of these different types of offerings, for themselves, so that they could eat, so that they could drink, and that they could have other things, because they were not able to grow things. They were not able to be herdsmen and such. They had to they worked for God. They worked directly for God. They were chosen to work directly for God. Is there any type of people that you could think of now in common day that maybe are similar, that have roles that are they work for God. I know we still have priests. I know even some religious sects have different types of priests and people that work strictly for the Lord. You have nuns still. Are there any examples that you can think of? Does this bring any thoughts or feelings to you? The next area is the grain offering. We read about the grain offering and how it was prepared and with fine flour and oil, and together with the incense, and it was burnt. We know that the grain offering was also important, and they were to they were not to use yeast. So yeast, as we know, is a agent that makes bread rise. And so this was another symbol that could be utilized. It goes also back, because remember when the Israel left Egypt, they were having to leave fast. And so during the Passover, the directions that God had provided through Moses was for the people to be prepared, to be ready. So they were supposed to be dressed and ready to go at any time. And part of that, and that was during the death of the firstborn. They were supposed to put blood over their doorposts, and then they were supposed to eat. They were supposed to have a specific meal, and that included unleavened bread, because they did not have time. They did not have the time to wait for the bread to rise. And so that tells us too, it's not our time, or we don't wait. When God tells us to move, we move. When it's time, God will do things. It's not based on our feelings or wants and what we feel we need or what we think we need. It's on God's timing, not ours. And there are so many different ways that I have learned this throughout even my life. I've noticed that. When it comes to even having things, whether it was buying my first car, or buying my first house, or going through my careers, through different jobs, or going to as simple as going to the store, going to a grocery store, going to a specific place, or going on a specific trip. There was always a purpose, but it was all in God's time. It's always in God's time when things specifically happen. And so this just tells me again that all of these, everything happens when God, it tells us to move. We need to move. When we always need to be ready. That's what I was trying to get out. Always need to be ready. And the grain offering was a good example of example of being ready, and the grain offering having no yeast, and it was a representation to the people of Israel as well. Then we have the fellowship offering, and again, the fellowship offering was, just as we know what this fellowship is between people. It's between the people and God. It's to give thanks, which again is part of the different offerings that we are going to see here. And we'll read definitely more in depth. There's going to be more throughout the Bible as we continue on. The fellowship offering was important as well. Then we have the sin offering. The sin offering was whether intentional or unintentional. It was to redeem people and from their sin. Again, whether intentional or unintentional. It was specific. It was a representation as well. It's a representation of the person. Once again, they placed their hand on the animal. They slaughtered that specific animal, and that was to represent the death of the sin to them, and also the importance of being able to live within God's presence, because God is sinless. God is without sin, and He does not like sin. Sin equals death. Sin is punishable. He doesn't want to punish us. God is not here to punish us. He wants to love us all the time. However, sin equals death. So sin equals punishment. So nowadays we're past the New Testament with His Son. So we can ask for forgiveness and belief in His Son, Jesus Christ. And the blood flow, as I said, it also, to me, sent me all the way to the New Testament with Jesus and what Jesus had to go through. The thorns on His head, the piercing of His side. That it just goes to show us that what the wages of sin are. It's death, and He was the ultimate sacrifice. So we have all these animals being sacrificed then during the law and during the Old Testament, but Jesus has become our ultimate sacrifice. So we never have to do it again. So we don't have to worry about making atonement. We don't have to worry about making sacrifices, because it has already been done for eternity for all of us. And so we also read about a person being clean or unclean. And so when we continue to read, we'll read more about what makes a person clean and what makes a person unclean. And there's going to be more in-depth details when it comes to that. It may make you uncomfortable as well when we start reading about that. And that's another topic that we quickly discussed, is how the Bible can make you feel uncomfortable. And I want to let you know that's a good thing. That opens you up, that gives you more opportunity to think, that provides that insight, that provides that wisdom. It makes you go there, it forces you to go to a place that you feel uncomfortable, and that is okay, because in that uncomfortableness, you will find the answer, you will find the truth, and that is where God stands. He is there to give you that hug, to bring you out of that uncomfortableness. He's there to give you that love. He's there to give you that instruction for us all. So when it comes to, again, clean and unclean, back in Israel, the days after the Exodus, it was very important that they remain clean if they wanted to remain within the presence of God. And if they became unclean, there was specific things for them to do that they had to follow through completely, including the sacrifices that were needed. We've also talked about the guilt offering. We also talked about a man's word, and we'll get more into that later on as well. Your yeses being yeses and your noes being noes. Back with the guilt offering, when a person commits a violation and sins unintentionally, he is still, in regards to the Lord, he is still guilty. We are still guilty. And so what thoughts or feelings did that bring to mind for you? We do know that God is a living God. So even when you sin, or when you even sin by yourself, it's still a sin. It's still a sin, and God knows. So in today's lesson, we've read Leviticus 1 through 5, and we've learned quite a bit. And I want to thank you very much for reading along with me. I pray that you continue to read along with me. Please pray for myself as well as everyone, including yourself, that we continue to read and grow in God's wisdom. We continue to seek the light, the truth from God. And I pray that the word is revealing to us as well. Thank you again so much for joining me. God bless. Have a great afternoon, morning, evening. Again, God bless.